Do that.
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, do that.
Do that, but it's still going to be stinky. The way sprays atomize and get so fine, it's just a stink that lingers longer than when you brush something on. I don't care how good your ventilation is.
Can that be the quote at the front of the
Fake
show?
news. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares ever so deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. Today, we have Brian Pontalillo,
Good morning.
Rob Yeagan,
Hello.
and I am Justin Fink. Just a quick heads up to the audience out there. We have new microphone stands in the studio today. So
Yeah.
you may hear a little bit of us touching and adjusting and moving things around. And my favorite feature that Jeff really doesn't want me to touch during the show is the springs on the microphone stand sound like a bass.
Nice.
So you might hear that, everyone.
Not bad.
We'll do that between segments of the show to let us know when we're switching questions. So we missed you last week, Brian. We were...
I missed you guys.
Aw.
Eh.
Where'd you go?
I don't think that's true.
I was in, actually was right on the border of Portland, Oregon, and Washington State, working with a guy.
Which state were you in?
I was in both, actually. I got confused by the question. I stayed in Oregon, but I was, during the day on the job, I was in Washington State, a town called Camas, Washington.
All right.
Really cool town, former mill town, paper mill. It still has a big operating paper mill. Huge, actually. You drive into town, it's the first thing you see. And it's one of those amazing places where you just really want a tour. You know, you want to know what all these chambers are, what all these stacks are doing, what all the different shaped buildings, what's going on in there. But
Did you
don't
do it?
It's no, I don't know. I don't even know if they have tours.
You didn't blow off the chute and just walk around the
Blow
paper
off the
mill?
chute and walk around
Yeah.
the paper mill. But I'd love to go in there and see it. And there's not a window in sight, so I can't imagine working in there. But anyway, so a former paper mill town where back in the day that if you lived there, you worked there. That was how these
Pretty
towns,
much what every town was like, yeah.
how these towns were set up. Today it's a little bit, while the mill is still operating, a lot of people still work there. It's a little bit more of a
Goat rodeo?
Go rodeo, a commuter town for Portland, which has grown so much in the Portland area. So I was out there in Camas, Washington, working with Cliff Ham.
Cliff Ham, everybody.
Ham built if you're an Instagram user.
Yep.
So Justin found Cliff on Instagram at some point, and it was fond of Cliff's work.
Fond.
And sent me out there to work.
Set him out.
Sent me out there to work with Cliff, and I was kind of blown away.
He was blown away, Rob.
I was kind of blown away by.
Yeah, you were. I could tell you were blown away because you sent multiple text messages.
Yeah, you don't text.
about how blown away you were.
Yeah.
And I was like, number one, he never sends text messages.
Yeah.
Well, it ends there. I was like, this has to be special.
Yeah.
I was blown away that Cliff was wearing a Nirvana shirt in the photos.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like a Nirvana shirt from, I don't know what decade.
Well, don't forget, he's
I mean,
only
it had to be like 1993. How long has he been hanging on to that shirt for?
so Cliff's the right age to have been into Nirvana when they were
Yes.
playing, and they're 3 hours from Seattle, 2 hours from Seattle.
Yeah.
So it's like that's it's his hometown. He was also wearing a Sriracha shirt. We all like Sriracha, so check out the check out the Cliff's stories and upcoming issues for all the shirts he wears.
He's a shop manager for like a cabinet shop, right?
Cliff's not a cabinet shop. Cliff's title is cabinet shop manager for a design build company.
Oh, so it's a cabinet shop though, Brian.
You were way off, Justin.
How dare I get that?
dare you.
It's different though, because this is one of the reasons I was blown away was how well this company works together. So it's a design build company. The owner, it's called Cassius Design Build.
Mm-hmm.
The owner, Brian Cassius, I suppose, is sort of the business mind behind the company. He's former carpenter, and he's came up through the trades. Now he's the guy selling the jobs. He's put together a pretty kick-ass team of designers and carpenters. And we had dinner, and he told me a bit about this. And he really, his whole approach is, if I can put together a team that can really do amazing stuff, I can go out and sell them. I can go out and sell what they have to offer. So one of the things I was blown away by when I first walked into one of their projects, which was a kitchen that they had designed, and it was a gut remodel. And Cliff had done all of the cabinetry, including an island and range hood cover, which is one of the projects that we're going to publish. Custom range hood cover,
curved range hood. It's gorgeous.
I was really blown away by this kitchen, by the cabinetry, all the little details, and how right everything was. Just nothing seemed off. Nothing seemed like a workaround. Nothing seemed like, I couldn't find where there was a filler strip to take up some space, or where there was a reveal that was off.
Weren't you telling me that you were walking around the kitchen like checking every single reveal you could?
Trying to find something.
I had to look for something. I couldn't find it. And so when
Cliff's probably like, oh my God, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What is he doing?
When I learned more about their process, it's clearly the result of, a good designer and a good cabinet maker, but it's their collaboration.
Yeah.
As soon as she gets a design going, she starts talking to Cliff about it.
Yeah.
And he starts saying, well, what about this and what about this? Or this is going to be more challenging to build, but I think we can do it. And they just have this back and forth thing to hone in on a design and build that really makes sense.
Is he driving like the aesthetics of the project?
I think,
in addition to how it's actually going to be executed, there's that open collaboration, where the designer's not offended because the cabinet maker came back and said, "Hey, you should change the proportion on this."
Yes. Well, Cliff understands, he understands how things are built, and he understands structure. And I think what I gathered was that Cliff wants things to look how they should look, based on how you build things, right? And so, for example, he was talking about how he just really doesn't like false door panels in the side of a cabinet,
right?
And especially when you're designing cabinet that have furniture like feet,
yes,
and you're making this furniture, and then why are you putting furniture? Doesn't have a door on the side;
right.
It has a
side.
It has a side panel.
Right.
So why shouldn't my cabinets have side panels? Why would we put a false door there?
Yeah, I love that mentality.
Kind of
I totally agree with that kind of stuff. Yeah,
and so he brings that to it, and then
logic.
Well, it's another
logic.
Well,
yeah.
you know what? It's also a nice extension of that article we had recently with Marianne Cusato on the right moldings. Is like, well, why would you put that molding there? Because it would never have gone there.
Moldings
and you're
have a purpose.
Yeah, you're just putting something on because you feel like it needs something.
Right. Their profiles were structural at one point or purposeful at one point. And
Is Cliff getting that right?
I think Cliff's getting that right. Yeah. Cliff's got a pretty minimal approach to ornamentation, which you guys know I'm a fan of, and that's probably another reason why I really thought highly of his work. And then just watching him work and watching and sort of, he claims to be self-taught, and I think, and I don't say claims like I'm doubting that, but I think he really has over the years just sort of learned a lot of and developed a lot of tips and tricks on his own, just from doing things, from trying to make processes and products better. And he has a ton to share in that realm. And so he works very efficiently, but he also just keeps going until things are perfect. There were a couple of times I told you guys this, but there were a couple of times where I was watching him put a couple of pieces of molding together, like on a miter, and I look at it, that looks sweet. And Cliff walks back to the saw. it wasn't quite good enough for him.
Yeah.
So he strives for this level of perfection that is pretty amazing. And at the same time, he knew how to make decisions for productivity.
It sounds like he
talked a lot about when to buy doors versus when to build them and that kind of thing.
Going on sites with people like that is very contagious.
Yeah.
It's very, and I've said this before, I always strive to have my wood shop look nice, and it doesn't, but I've tried to make it look nice, because then in that nice space where I took care with miters and finishes, it makes me want to continue to take care with the work I'm doing.
Yeah.
If you surround yourself with crap, you might start to slip and say, well, I'll just make more crap. But when you go visit a guy like that who is going back and forth to the miter saw 6 times to get it right, it's hard the next time you're mitering something to not go, I could probably make this a little better if I just go back to the saw one more time.
Yeah.
And it's contagious that way, and that's cool. But
so you did a range hood with him?
Yeah, so I photographed 2 stories. The range hood, which will be coming up in our kitchen and back issue, probably.
An awesome project, by the way.
It is an awesome project.
I think it's more approachable than people think. I don't think people...
The curved, we're skipping right past the easy one and going to the master class.
But I don't think people... I don't think it occurs to people that they could, you do this as a project or offer this to their clients.
Yeah. So this is I don't
There's
even
a lot
know
of
what you
prefab
call it.
custom
It's
things out there that you buy online. But
And they can look really good. It doesn't have to be the
awesome.
box, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
those
I
stupid,
would-
awkward, shallow, those squatchy cabinets that people put up there and just run the duct through it. Barf.
Part of what I got from this project is I can do this now that I know a few things. Like just seeing the structure and you're like, oh yeah, got it. But Cliff also had a whole bunch of, I watched him do a whole bunch of things that I would not have thought to do. And so I think there's going to be so many like little nuggets in there for like, oh yeah, do that. You know, make that sanding block and get those things in plane. That's the most important thing here. Just these little things that I would have been nailing MDF onto this thing and kicking myself, you know.
But he was also out there shooting floating shelves, making floating shelves, and they're very modern aesthetic floating shelves, and they're really cool. That's going to be in a more recent or in a soon to be released issue, whereas you'll have to wait a little longer for the range hood. But Jeff, if we could get a little special, fantastic celebration bugle sound here, I'd like to announce that Brian has finally finished his kitchen.
Oh yeah, that's right. I was hoping that would come up on the show.
And the last piece was this floating shelf that you were inspired to build, right?
Well, so I had right before I left for the trip, I put the last coats of finish on those 2 kitchen cabinets, and so they were waiting for me. When I came back, they were dry and ready to go home. So I drove down to, I just come back from the trip with Cliff. I drove down to the shop to grab the cabinets to bring them home to install them. And I saw a piece of pre-finished maple plywood sitting there. I couldn't help myself. You know, I dove. I felt like, I said this before, it was like a Justin Fink moment, how I just dove into it. Like, and
you made it out of pre-finished plywood? I didn't know that.
Yeah, pre-finished maple. It's what I had sitting there. I just had to try it. And so I dove right into doing this, and it took about
following Cliff's technique,
you know, just exactly what I learned on the shoot. I made the shelf. I brought it home with me that day. It was the first thing I did was walk into the kitchen and install it just how Cliff taught me how to do it. The shelf is pretty nice, but it's horribly huge for my kitchen. The proportions are way off. But I was just like, I'm putting this thing up. There was no stopping me.
Yep.
So I not only got my cabinets in that day, but I also put up my own floating shelf.
Yeah, that's a really cool article, and they're gorgeous. But
it's a neat technique. It's more of a woodworking technique to building shelves.
It's just plywood, though. I mean, there's nothing special
just plywood.
to it.
There's nothing special to it, but it's a
no brackets,
that,
no fancy
that, like,
hardware.
Box makers use. Yeah.
Can I hold you to a publication date?
It is currently scheduled for issue 276, which is I think
soon. It's our next issue to go out of
June, July, I think. I don't know. But you said hold you to an issue date.
Yeah. I don't know how many people go by the numbers. We go by numbers. They went a month.
Numbers right on the binding, people.
They'll be waiting at the newsstand for this one.
If we can put everyone on hold, I can look it up. If Jeff could play some elevator music or something, perhaps we can just. You can make pleasant conversation while I look at this.
Hey, I got my inspection yesterday for the insulation.
Yes. Tell me more.
June, July.
All right, June, July, everybody. Thanks.
All right, let's move off.
Yeah, I got my inspection. Insulation. It was pretty underwhelming. I mean, came up there, looked around, said, okay, here's your slip. He did want me, so there was a couple areas where I did craft face fiberglass bats. And there was a couple areas where I peeled the facing off the bat to install it into like a really tight cavity, and I left it off. I left that craft facing off, and he just, not that he dinged me, but he was like, yeah, you're gonna have to cover that up before you put the drywall. Mm-hmm. He said something that was interesting though. He said, because the tighter you make this place, I guess the more likely vapor is to find those areas where there's not facing and could cause issues. And I was mentioning it to you this morning, Brian. I was like, is that true? I mean, I could understand. I mean, this is not my, that facing is not my air barrier. Mm-hmm. So I can understand the pressure differentials and the air leakage. I mean, this is my vapor barrier. And we know that a vapor barrier doesn't necessarily need to be continuous or, it could be perforated and still be effective.
Yeah.
And I understand that moisture rides on air but it was just.
He was saying that
it was a curious comment.
Can anyone explain why that is, that a vapor barrier doesn't need to be continuous?
I cannot. Scientifically, I cannot.
Not without refreshing my memory on actually reading where we have it written.
I don't understand that.
I can't remember anything.
I don't. I just recall period blanket statement. I I just know that. I mean, that has been Joe Stiebrick has written about this extensively on building science on his website and the white papers that they create, and it just comes up time and time again. I don't know the actual science that's happening behind it. To make it so, but otherwise I'm good to go. Drywall next.
Awesome.
Brian's going to carry every sheet up for me.
Are you going to work over? You going to go over there to work on?
The only thing I offered is some painting.
That's all he offered.
That's all I offered.
And I appreciate the offer. I might take him up on it.
I'd like to. I meant to bring this up, Brian, because I wanted to talk about it when you were talking about your article with Cliff and the method that he uses for putting the shelves together is essentially cutting angled edges on a bunch of pieces of plywood and kind of folding them up into a 5-sided box that slides onto a cleat.
Correct.
And so you handed the article in, and I'm reading it, and I had a very Kevin Ireton moment, who is our former editor, who's
can't wait for this.
Who we've talked about in the air, who's famously worried about the slot cut into the bottom of a door, and whether to call that slot a groove or a dado, because it both goes with the grain and against the grain, depending on the part of the door that it's crossing, and it crosses both. So I'm reading Brian's story, and we're talking about people like, all right, you lay out these pieces of plywood, you set the table saw to a 45-degree angle, and you run the piece through to cut the miter. And I'm going,
Bevel?
And then so I started thinking, I was like, all right, I gotta back up from this. I'm going, what is a miter? And a miter is two pieces coming together. Some definitions say at a 90-degree angle, and there's a line that bisects that angle. So like a perfect picture frame corner would be a classic example of a miter.
Yeah.
And you could be looking at the edge of the board or the face of it, and it's still a miter.
Okay.
You could be looking
depending on how you put it together.
Okay.
So like a box might be joined in a miter.
Yep.
Because you're looking down the short dimension of it, or a picture frame on the flat could be a miter.
Yep.
Same thing, right? So then I was like, well, then what's a bevel? Do two bevels make a miter? And this was the rest of my day, pretty much. Because
we want the money back.
Yeah, because I spent a long time on this, and
did you look up bevel?
Oh yeah. Oh, I was looking it up in all sorts of dictionaries.
What'd you get?
I went over and talked to Woodworking for a while. I talked to Woodworking's copy editor because I figured this has to have come up with them. Like in talking about making a piece of furniture, you're cutting a piece with a bevel on it and then joining pieces together and clamping the miter. That's what makes sense to me. Each piece is beveled, and when put together as a unit, they are now a mitered joint.
But if you look at a leg of casing that's cut on a 45-degree angle to assemble a miter joint, would you say that that's beveled?
No, that's where it gets weird, though.
But that what you're saying is that is a bevel.
And I think what I ultimately,
That's what he's saying.
So I had to jokingly send this email to Kevin,
Yeah.
and be like, this is what we're worried about, and he wrote back, I'm very proud that you're worried about this, but I think it's, he said, I think it's essentially like throwing deck chairs off the Titanic at this point. And he said,
so says the semi-retired guy.
Yeah. well, Brian's comment was, oh, you emailed Kevin about this? Well, there goes Cynthia's night. So what we said was, he said, from his point of view, that, and he doesn't like to, and as a rule, we don't like to either, defer to what manufacturers call things and assume that they're right, because often they play a little fast and loose with terms, and we like to be as accurate as possible and kind of set the standard for using the right language. So you get in this situation where you look up the right language, and I think it technically is two bevels making a mitered joint, but that's almost fallen out of favor to the point where it's confusing when you say it. Because now everyone,
Right.
after the invention of the miter saw, they have kind of taken over and said, when you're chopping straight up and down, but turned at a 45 degree, that's a miter cut. And when you tilt the saw blade, that's a bevel cut.
Bevel cut.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of forced now to say it the wrong way so that people can understand it, which I just thought was kind of funny.
It is funny. Brian's cracking up over there.
Brian's laughing hilariously. Rob, do you want to do anything else with the JLC live show? We had a couple of things we didn't get a chance to talk about there. I know one of them was that kind of nail-based foam panel that we saw, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
It was called Thermal Star was the name of it, and
right.
it was so people on that show people heard us talk about the Zip R sheathing, which we've talked about before, which is foam on the inside of a piece of zip system sheathing. There are also companies that are making kind of the reverse of that, which is a sheet of structural sheathing with foam on the outside. And I thought it was kind of interesting. It actually started to make me wonder if this is a topic we wanted to dig into sometime in the magazine, is all the, because I started to dig into who else is making these, and they're often called nail base panels.
So nail base is not a brand.
Nail base is, well, I mean, maybe it's a brand name, but I think it's a type of.
Okay.
It's essentially half of a SIP panel.
Right.
It's like instead of being skinned on both sides, it's skinned on one side. And in the case of Zip System, they want to maintain that external air and vapor and drainage plane, so they install it. So you put the piece up and you fasten through the sheathing and the foam to the studs. And so for their system, you need to use 4-inch nails in a lot of cases, which is what we talked about in the show.
Yeah, they each have their drawbacks, right? Because it also makes siding and trim installation easier then.
Yes, because you can fasten right to the sheathing. Well, yes, assuming that the siding companies are okay with that. So then I looked into that because, you know, we talked to Alan about this on the show when we were at JLC, and he's like, yeah, you have to use these nails that are equivalent to the amount of foam you're going through, and often that means getting a new nailer that can shoot higher capacity. So I went back to the office and went, well, what does that cost? And it was about, you know, $500 to $700 for that new nailer that shoots those new nails.
How many nailers are out there?
I didn't get that far. I found, I think, one made by Max USA, and I felt satisfied that that's a really good company and that it's going to be a good tool.
Yep.
But then when we were talking to the guy at Thermal Star, which is the flip version, where you put this piece of foam up and you use this special nail gun that has like a wide nose on it, so it bears on the foam. And then when you pull the trigger, the drive pin of the nail gun extends all the way out past the nose through the foam to drive the nail flush to the sheathing behind the foam.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what does that nailer cost? And the guy goes, about $700. So now I'm going, wow, this is like an even playing field now between these two systems. And it really got me spinning into like, well, which one would I use if I was going to choose one of these two? So what do you guys think? Would you fasten through the sheathing and foam or through the foam and sheathing?
I don't know. I mean, I think a more thorough investigation is warranted by the magazine because there were some properties of that Thermal Star that they were not questionable, but there was some conversation around like the because it has almost like a clear WRB applied to it, doesn't it?
It was like a graphite infused EPS foam.
Okay.
So that's one difference right there, is that Zip R is polyiso.
Okay.
And this is EPS, so different kinds of foam, different R values.
Yeah.
There are some that would argue foam on the outside of the sheathing is safer than foam behind the sheathing, because then you're keeping the sheathing warmer. But the Zip System seems like it would be easier to fasten and weatherize. So
I mean, I guess you could. I mean, I saw one comment about that product on someone else's feed where they were questioning the use of that Thermal Star as their WRB, essentially, because that's going to be the most exposed element behind the siding. And I thought to myself, well, how is that different than putting rigid foam on the exterior of your house?
People do that all the time. Yeah, I mean, assuming it's not an open cladding siding that's going to be exposed to UV.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the problem with that?
I don't
tape
know.
the seams of the foam and you're good to go. They were doing a little fancy dance at Thermal Star, though, where they were coming, well, you know, this has some drainage characteristics, so you don't need furring strips.
That's
and
what
we're
I was concerned about.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, there was some stuff that was questionable in terms of its ability to dry.
That's kind of the hot new thing, is that people...
Where the drainage plane is.
The manufacturers have caught on to this thing where everybody's concerned about drainage planes.
And so they just say, yeah, we got it covered.
And they're all saying, yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
having the sheathing, the nailing surface on the outside of the foam, it seems to me is going to make your work going forward from there a lot nicer.
Before you say that, I forgot to, this is pretty critical, is I forgot to mention that on the Thermal Star product, the foam is so dense that you can fasten siding right to it. And that's a pretty huge thing to point out.
That's true.
That's what they had. That was their setup. They had cedar shingles and clapboards installed right to it. Yeah. That was kind of the big thing about it.
Wow.
Yeah. So
What about windows?
Interesting.
I would assume you'd have to buck out windows. Oh no, or fasten straight through the foam and into framing, probably.
Long screws.
Just long nails,
Which is
long
no big
screws,
deal,
yeah.
as far as I'm concerned. But
Well, except with foam, you have the compression and all that kind of stuff.
I don't think you're compressing this stuff.
Really?
It was pretty
So
hard.
it's like high density EPS.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So there's.
let's check them out.
I think there's some stuff to dig into there.
For
Do
sure.
you think if we dig into that, do you think that there has to be a comparison to
Standard application?
sheathing plus foam plus, or are these systems sort of so eliminating so much labor that becomes a non-issue or not worth comparing?
I mean, I think
You have to do a cost comparison to that, I guess.
cost comparison.
yeah.
Cost comparison.
Cost comparison. Yeah. I mean, I think the comparison is to like these one and done prefab kind of systems, as opposed to like weighing them against an alternative method. You know,
And the other cool thing that I landed on this because of is
meaning the constant is that they come off the truck and they're ready to install, and so I don't know.
staring contest.
Yeah.
But they're achieving the same. You're doing it for the same reason that you would sheathe your house, put foam on.
Yeah.
It's for the same effect. So I don't know.
I mean, what are the comparisons beyond cost that you would be interested? I mean, of course, it's going to be more labor.
It's going to be more labor, but sometimes when it comes to details, things could be either easier or more complex based on how you're
or more redundant and reliable.
and reliable based on how you're built, what you can do, your opportunities.
And you get to save $700 on a nail gun.
Yeah, but over the
That
course
needs to be weighed into the cost.
over the course
comparison.
of even a house, that's like it's not a big deal. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think that needs to be weighed in unless you're
We'll let the
building
numbers speak for
a
themselves.
shed.
We'll let you do the math, Justin.
Especially if you're a builder and you're going to do this more than once, then it's like, come on.
Yeah.
There was also something
It's
a
an
little
excuse
bit.
to buy
You
a new
probably
tool.
already ordered yours, didn't you?
Yeah, I might have.
Wasn't there something? There's kind of like a little bit of a hack going on with that gun that was used on the thermal star booth, where he put like his own bushing on the nose piece.
Yeah. I don't know what he was doing there.
Yeah, there was some
He
kind
said
of
he had to do some kind of adaptation to it.
some
that-
kind of modification.
Yeah.
I don't know
He
if
was
they-
trying to explain why he had to do it, and it was like, I don't know what we're talking about anymore.
Can you guys talk more about? Maybe you can't, but can you
We
talk
could
more
try.
about the aerosol air sealer?
We didn't see. Did you see it there?
I didn't see it there. I know that they were at the International Builders Show.
So yeah, this is apparently it started out as a company that was doing this for ductwork, and the idea was they would stick this thing up into ductwork, and it would do
Yes.
this light mist of some sort of acrylic. I think it was acrylic based product, and with the ductwork air flowing, this stuff would float through the duct. It would find the points of leakage because that's where it would kind of be sucked out, and it would coagulate and seal those areas. So you could kind of, do a good job installing your ducts, but then do this as a last step to kind of catch any little pinholes and really make it more
Right.
efficient. So then they expanded that concept into whole house air sealing from the interior. So you set up this little, it looks like a big lawn sprinkler to me, but the sprayer end of it looks like what you'd use when you're like spraying from like one of those pump garden sprayers for pesticides. And it just has like this mist that goes into the air while the blower door is running.
So the house is pressurized and air is being sucked through the leaks at that point.
It's being sucked, the air and this mist is being sucked through the leaks
Right.
and coagulating. I don't know. It just seems like,
It's like how you fix a tire, right?
yeah, but you have a
I've never
whole
used that
house
stuff.
going at
Fix
that
a
point.
flat.
So is everything covered? Like, what about the blower door even? Is that fan
Right.
ruined
Right.
now? Because I've just...
Because air is getting sucked out of there.
What about the
Yeah.
windows? What about, like, what if my windows are leaking? Now is this stuff sticking to my sash?
Right through the sash. Yeah, the weather stripping there. If there's a little
It
gap.
seems like the duct thing makes sense because what's the harm? It's the inside of a
It's
duct.
inside of a duct, yeah.
But the house is like, I don't know. I just feel like I haven't thought through enough stuff. Like, what about
I'd never-
electrical? What about...
I'd never heard of it until you guys mentioned it the other morning. It's
think it's called-
fascinating to me.
I think it's called AeroSeal, but I don't know a lot about it beyond just that's what it's supposed to do. I never got to talk to them at the Builders Show.
We should call him up. Jeff, get him on the line.
Get them on the hotline.
Get him on the hotline. Yeah, that's interesting and questionable. There's a lot. I don't know.
Yeah,
Seems
I think-
a little late night TV.
And I feel like I feel like if I can
Right? Doesn't
Yeah.
it?
I feel like if I can
Maybe
that,
it's legit.
I
I
feel like
don't
if I can that quickly poke holes in it that somebody smarter than me, which is most people, would be able to really say some things that are
Yeah.
questionable. But maybe they have answers for them, so it might be.
Yeah.
I'm sure when you hang out at the Builder Show and do a product like that, you're getting a lot of people coming up
Yeah.
And you're going to very quickly realize what things people are concerned about, and you're going to have answers for them.
Well, yeah.
I don't know if that's true at all. I mean, do you remember when we were talking to that guy who had this really killer roof, those vent baffles?
Well, but how much do you?
Oof.
Yeah,
I still feel bad for
Well,
that guy.
that guy did not know how to install
These
roof
were
venting.
this roof venting.
We got roof venting in.
Great product, great product, but you could only install it from the top.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And so, so before the sheathing is applied to the
Yeah.
roof, and so we asked, "Oh, this is sweet. How do you, in conventional application, how do you install it from the interior?" The face went blank.
Yeah.
And then this is the worst sign. He retreated to the pamphlet.
Oh yeah, that was bad.
He had, and just started scanning his own pamphlet for the answer.
Yeah, that was bad.
And Justin and I just eventually let him off the hook and said, "It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna leave now."
Yeah.
And it's not always the startups. I mean, we don't need to name any names, but we've seen some big time manufacturers release a couple of duds.
Oh, yeah.
In the past decade or so too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you'd like to think that they have answers to the questions. Why do we say that?
especially to the fundamental ones.
right.
And it's really worrisome when it's like the third day of the show, and that's the first time somebody's raised a question of how do you install this roof venting from the conventional side of the roof? Like, who's installing roof venting on the outside before the sheathing goes down? Like, wait, what? Maybe it was meant to solve some problem, and the guy just didn't know how to pitch it. Like, yeah, this is very specifically for remodelers who are working on houses that don't have
Maybe.
ventilation and they
Let's
can't
give
get
him
into
that.
the corners
You
from
know
the
what?
inside, so we do it from the outside.
We
and
were
then it's like, cool.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were talking about. Let's just go
Well,
with that.
yeah, sure. Extreme ownership.
We'll take the blame on that.
Yeah. What do you guys want to do for questions?
I like the first one.
Yeah, that's
All
cool.
right.
I like the second one too.
I don't know who. I forgot to put the name down on this one. Hi, guys. Today, I, whoever you are, painted a hydronic radiator for a bedroom in my home. I had done some internet research on the best way to do this. Most boiled down to good prep and spraying it with a high-temperature spray paint. So I did that, even creating a tent around the radiator to keep overspray contained and wearing a respirator with the correct canister. Functionally, all went as planned, but the smell for the rest of the house was bad. What method would you recommend for the next time I need to paint a radiator? I'm in snow country, and we still have feet of snow on the ground and below freezing temperatures, so ventilation is harder right now. Well, wait until it's not the winter is my first piece of advice, and then you can open the windows and have
Yeah.
You
And
know-
also
I mean,
don't spray it.
that's okay.
You can get high temperature paint in a can, and
I've only seen it spray. You
you
can
can get
brush
it
it
in a
on.
can. Yeah, I know Rust-Oleum makes one.
Dude, who wants to brush a radiator though? That's a huge pain.
The guy that doesn't want his house to smell like
Well, all I'm saying is
fumes for the rest of the day.
all I'm saying is you block off the doorways and all the points of entry into the room, and then you open up a window and have a fan exhausting. It can be a very low speed fan. You just want to create slight negative pressure so that it's going out the window. And you can do that even in the winter. You're not drawing that much air out.
That was
Yeah.
my.
And that works. That works.
And put a filter over the fan if it's right above the radiator.
That works.
what kind of filter?
Just like a furnace filter is what I've used. Just tape it on there so you protect the fan from getting clogged up with spray with AeroSeal. Get
Yeah.
it, Brian?
yeah,
that.
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, do that.
Do that, but it's still going to be stinky. The way sprays atomize and get so fine, it's just a stink that lingers longer than when you brush something on. I don't care how good your ventilation is.
Can that be the quote at the front of the
Fake
show?
news. Sure can.
I'm with Justin. Just do that. Create yourself a little spray booth in
Yeah.
there almost, and get some slight negative pressure.
Yeah,
And-
Rob and I are going to be done spray painting this thing in a minute and a half. Brian's
It's a
still going to be there
radiator.
3 hours
it's gonna,
in.
It's a radiator. It's going to take me 3 minutes.
How
I'll
you gonna
double
get-
my time.
how you gonna get
and
the-
not have my
Brian's
house
gonna have
stink.
his little
Yeah.
brushes out, getting in all the
A
little
little mirror to
crannies.
hold up the back of the.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're going to drip all over the floor. It's going to be goops on there. No.
you get a nice
No
thick coat
good.
of paint though.
I have.
What's that?
I bet you get a nice thick coat of paint with a brush though.
I've heard that the more paint you put on those, actually, the better they are because it's essentially,
Adding thermal mass.
Well, I guess I say that in response to, should I strip this thing first? I've heard people ask that, like, do I need to strip paint off this thing to repaint it? And the answer is kind of, no, it's not going to hurt. In fact, in a very minimal sense, it will improve the thermal mass of the thing because it's essentially a giant heat sink, right?
How hot do those things get?
they're like warm to, I mean, properly used, I guess, you know, probably warm to or very warm to the touch, you know, like maybe you wouldn't want to, because I mean, people hang towels and things on them or like sit on them or lean on them, but you might get a little, Jeff's making a face. No, Jeff, you disagree?
What? No, I just thinking hydronic radiator, how somebody leaning on it, but.
Oh, no, we're talking about like the big cast iron ones.
Oh, they get smoking hot.
Well, they can, but should they?
Jeff says smoking hot.
Well, I mean,
Can that be the
if it's
quote at the end of the show?
Now who's spewing the fake news?
if it's a steam radiator,
Yeah.
it's in excess of 200 degrees.
Ah, steam. Gotcha.
Oh, but he said hydronic.
Hydronic.
So.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking baseboard hydronic.
Well, now we're painting something totally different. Do we even, I mean, if he's painting the covers on a baseboard heater, do you even need high temperature paint for
No.
that? Brian says no.
Absolutely not. I've painted them a lot and
Could be fake news. You ever had a callback?
never had a callback.
All right.
All right. Going with that.
Anything else you want to talk about there? Nope. Well, guess what, guys? We have a new segment that we're launching this week. And I hesitate to call it a segment, but
Brian's so unimpressed.
why?
I like the new microphone stands.
One new thing at a time for Brian.
Well,
He's still trying to adjust.
so the reason for this is that we're finding that a lot of our podcast listeners are finding their first experience with fine home building is this podcast. So for those people that haven't checked out the magazine and our videos, we thought we would kind of float some of that decades of great content into the show so that things that you've never seen or heard about, it'll be surfaced for you and you can kind of check out those favorites. So what we can do is we can just essentially pick a theme. So today, for instance, we are going to pick sort of like an editor's choice, Brian, favorite framing articles.
Yep.
And since you are such a stick in the mud, you have to go first.
Okay. I went. Mine's kind of to be.
It's not a framer article, is it?
No, it's the framer article. I feel like, and I knew you weren't going with this because you had shown me yours, and I bet that Rob wasn't. But I went with the standard.
Oh, golden rules.
Larry Hahn's original
10 rules.
10 rules for framing.
Yeah.
For one of the real reason why I went with this story is because I feel like it's, you know, if people haven't seen it, they should see it.
That's the whole point of this, the whole segment, Brian, is, you know, the must read.
So what's going on in that article?
So this is from 2003. It's Larry Hahn, who, if you don't know Larry Hahn, he's a legend as both a builder and a fine home building author.
A minister of all things framing.
Yes, and 10 rules for framing. Larry was a production framer. Larry was working in did he start off in California, Southern California?
You didn't start off there, but that's where
That's where
bulk
most
of
of the
his career.
production
Yeah,
was,
where he and his brother were framing a house a day in these developments.
Yeah,
you
no
know?
joke.
And no joke.
Yeah.
Like they were framing a house a day with hammers,
Yes.
swinging hammers. And so Larry's
They were pretty simple houses, but still.
Yes, still.
Yeah.
And so Larry's what Larry has to offer is about production framing, is about
Yes.
efficiency. And I feel like, you know, you can once you have to learn how to frame things. You have to learn how things should be framed. You have to know the codes when it comes to framing. In fact, that's one of the rules. But then once you know that stuff, when you understand square, level, and plumb and these things, now you got to get to work and you got to get it done because that's what framing is all about. So Larry's article is about efficiency. It's about, you know, moving materials as little as possible. It's about knowing what the right acceptable tolerances are for framing. It's about things that which I love because this story will always
Piss people off.
Piss people off and at least create a conversation.
Yep.
He talks about choosing your lumber, you know, the right lumber in the right places, which is a lesson that I can always use, remembering to take a look at a stick of lumber before I use it, deciding where to use it.
One of the things in there that I really liked that he told, and it was right up front, is, and this is something that people that are new to remodeling or like real professional building never seem to know about, is when you call up to lumberyard to make your order, you can tell them what order you want things stacked in, so that, you know, because if you don't, like, let's say you're framing a deck and the biggest pieces of lumber you're going to get are probably 2x12s for the stair stringers. Those are going to be all the way on the bottom probably because that's the biggest piece of lumber and they stack everything on top of it. And if you need those soon, you have to move everything to get to them. So think about the order you're going to build in, and then you can have them stack it in that order so that you can just peel off the top and keep moving.
Yeah.
It's just
That's cool.
It's a huge takeaway.
Rule number 5 is great, which is to keep other trades in mind. You're really the first one. I mean, other than the people putting the foundation in the ground, you're the first one there. And so everything builds on what you've done. So think about the other trades. Just things like not measuring unless you need to, cutting multiples, all these kinds of things that, like I said, once you know what you're doing, it becomes what framing's about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cool.
What'd you get, Rob?
So I will say this, probably not my.
By the way, I should have mentioned you can look at these articles on finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Mike will put up links to all these.
Sure. So this is likely not my most favorite framing article ever coming out of Fine Home Building, but it's a good one. And I think I chose it just for the seasonality, really. I think we're heading into deck building season. And so deck framing is kind of a hot topic. And so I resurfaced the complete guide to building a deck, which was done and written by Mike Gurton. And there's actually a companion video series to this too, featuring you, Justin. Correct?
Oh, this is the grade level deck.
Was this
is
the project house? Yeah.
And so I mean, this article, there's 20 pages, which is awesome, and it goes beyond framing. But within the article, there's lots of good tips. Mike always has good ideas for framing, whether how to install that ledger. He's got a production style for hanging joist hangers, which is pretty cool with a slick little jig. I just had to set a rim beam, and so it's just, the aesthetics and the design of the deck are, take it for what it is. But I just thought that if anyone is contemplating building a deck this summer or this spring, they should read this article because they're going to get the frame to be rock solid.
That simple tip about that we've published, I think, a few times in different variations about using a jig for your joist hangers so you can install them ahead of time. That actually creates a lot of controversy too. A lot of people do not feel comfortable. The lumber's so varies so much in dimensions that they don't feel comfortable setting their joist hangers before they're actually installing that particular joist.
Did we talk about this on the air when stop me if we talked about this, but back when I was building decks more regularly, I ran into what Brian's talking about, where you buy a bunch of 2x10s, pressure treated 2x10s. Some are 9 1/4 inches wide, some are 9 1/2. I've even had something like 9 3/4, like crazy wet and swollen or whatever. And so like you'd set the joists and then you would string line them and come back and use a thickness plane, use a handheld portable power planer to cut them down or use a circ saw before they're installed or whatever. And I thought I'm doing a good job here because I'm making everything the same level, but it's all going to just shrink more from there. So I think I was just screwing things up, trying to do the right thing.
We were talking, we mentioned that in the context of knowing your tolerances.
Yes.
Where we were talking about getting
planing the sills.
Planing sills and planing things to be dead perfect. Knowing that they're going to change.
But the why I bring it up is because just recently on an article we just worked on with Gurton, he taught us, and I never even thought about this, to don't try and touch the joists, just sort the joists in the pile from narrow, from the shortest width to the widest, and then either lay them out so that the widest ones are in the center of the deck and they taper down to the outsides, or from most narrow to the widest as they go across the deck. So it's consistent and you don't notice it. And then if they shrink, it doesn't matter. So it's just like
smart.
Yeah, it's that kind of stuff that you get in these articles with Mike, where you just feel like it's so much more than a illustrated guide to doing it. It's not an instruction manual; it's a best practices manual. You know, it's a lot like the Larry article. It speed things up.
Right.
What'd you pull?
Mine was Frame a Classic Shed Dormer with John Spear. And I love this article because I think it was an awesome balance. John had an awesome... I shot this article, and what I thought I was going to shoot was just how to frame a shed dormer. But what we came out with was John had so many lessons about how to frame it so that it looks good, which is really refreshing from a framer. He's not just worried about slapping it up. He's designing it. He's also the designer on the project, so he brought in a lot of insights like where should those rafters on the shed dormer land in relation to the roof ridge. And the two options are essentially, line it up with the ridge or drop it down, a purposeful amount, like a foot or two. And if you're going to make it connect to the ridge, this was kind of an aha moment for me. Actually, raise those shed roof rafters up a little bit, because when you're on the other side of the house, if you don't, you're going to see a dip in those ridge shingles. If you raise up the shed dormer rafters a little bit, then from the front of the house, the ridge caps are dead straight.
Gotcha.
Because it'll leave like a little dip because of the change in roof pitch, which was like, oh. And then once you know that, you start looking at houses going, they didn't know that. and he's also got really great tips for one of the other major flaws that in shed dormer design is that you frame that front wall, and then there has to be headers over your windows, obviously. So you need to leave room for those headers. And then, so what is that going to be? At least a 2x8 or more. So then you have at least that much space above your window in an already pretty constricted height situation. So what he does is, instead of using just the standard bird's mouth cut in the rafters, which is just plumb and level, he actually cuts like a U shape so that the header tucks up into the rafters. And then he reinforces it with joist hangers, which is completely code compliant. It's not a special thing.
That's what I was curious about, yeah.
Yeah, and there's some drawing in here that shows you how to do it. And what that does is gets you all of those extra inches. You tuck the header up, and now you can have bigger windows, or they can be up higher, and it just looks better.
It's the hanger that makes that possible. Because normally you wouldn't need that, correct?
Yes. Normally you wouldn't need a hanger,
right.
no. Well, you would need a rafter tie.
Yeah.
So you'd need a piece of hardware there anyway. But
that's sweet. That's
cool.
It's
super cool. And, some details for the bottom where, plan where your window lands so that you have the piece of apron, piece of trim under the window that fills up the space you need without being an awkward thing like the window trim and then one course of siding or a narrowly ripped window trim.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's just thinking through, and then he actually will tell you how to frame it after all that.
To me, that's the biggest thing in any dormer, whether it's gable or a shed, is like that window placement and how it kind of dives into the roof where it doesn't. I mean, I drive by a house often that literally has the sill, like the window sill, right on the roof plane. I mean, there's no piece of trim beneath it whatsoever. Not only is that kind of a weatherization nightmare in my mind, but aesthetically it looks so strange. I don't know.
Yeah, look, you can tell when somebody either didn't think about the design of it or they only thought about it from the inside.
Yeah, right. That's a good one.
Yeah, so check those out, finehomebuilding.com/podcast, and Mike will get you the links for all those things. And we'll have some more for you. Not every week, but sometimes.
All right. A new segment.
New segment. Are you impressed now, Brian? Sam writes, I live in the mountains outside of Salt Lake City in a 2-story slab-on-grade house consisting of an A-frame built on top of cinder block walls. I have re-insulated the top floor of the house with spray foam and improved things up there, but my main floor still feels drafty. All the windows and doors have been replaced and the grout lines on the blocks are in good shape, so my next step is to air seal or insulate the block walls since they are porous, and I'm sure there are cracks I can't see. My question centers on what options might be for this project. I've thought about maybe using an especially thick exterior paint to seal the blocks. Maybe I could use stick-on foil house wrap to create a seal outside and then put some siding over that. In any case, air tightness is my main objective since I think that would make a big difference, but insulation would also be helpful. If you have any recommendations, I would really appreciate it. I had a couple of red flag things that popped up in this question for me.
Before we get to that, are we to assume that the block part of the house is above grade, or that's his foundation and it's below grade?
When he says A-frame, what does he say? A-frame built on top of cinder block walls, I'm really picturing like short walls of cinder block and then mostly roof, like one of those kind
like
of
an
ski
A-frame.
chalet.
Yeah.
I always. So then,
What are you laughing at?
well then, I mean, if
I've got a 2-story slab-on-grade house consisting of an A-frame built on top of a cinder block wall.
yeah, so
And you're like an A-frame. Yeah, he says it's an A-frame.
but it's a slab on grade,
Right,
so the
but
blocks go above.
Oh, yeah.
It's a slab on grade.
Right.
Okay.
Rewind the tape.
Slab on grade with a few blocks and then the A-frame.
Yeah.
And he wants
Yeah.
to air seal those blocks.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
And whatever is going on
right?
between.
yeah, but that's what I don't understand. You
What
shouldn't
don't
need
you
to air
understand?
seal the blocks. Blocks are not notorious for being leaky for air, as far as I know.
I know that
But that framing,
certain
the
people would disagree
transition.
with you.
Sure, the transitions, but I don't know that.
I believe that Martin Holliday would say you need to air seal cracks in your basement floor and in your basement walls.
That's
How is that different?
well because he said that it's already.
Get him, Brian.
He's saying that he's saying I have to insulate the block walls since they are porous. Those I feel like we're confusing things here. They're porous, meaning they will let moisture go through. I understand that.
Yep.
They are potentially hollow, which means that they're not very good thermally. So we need to fill them with something or put
No matter
some
what,
insulation on the outside.
poor thermally. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the air leakage part of it. Like if you address those other two things the right way, I don't think even if concrete blocks are air leaky, they're not going to continue to be air leaky. And I don't know what stick-on foil house wrap is. That's another concern I have here. Do I not know about this product?
He might. Well, he was talking about some sort of tape. I believe maybe he was thinking of a. There's a lot of now adhesive house wraps.
Like peel and
Maybe he
sticks.
was thinking of that, but my guess is that he was thinking more.
Or
if he
like
said
think of
foil of a tape, a flashing
Think of like
tape.
the Henry Blue skin.
I knew you were going to say that.
That sort of
Do you
thing.
have
That's what I
stock
was
in that
talking
company,
about,
Rob?
That's great stuff, huh?
Have either of you even used it?
No, I like the idea of
I
it
know
though.
some people who love it.
Rob?
One guy, two guys now.
Okay.
All right, so what's the solution for this guy? So he's insulated his roof.
Yeah, so it sounds like the roof's done. We don't need to touch that. But
He's feeling, but his main level is feeling drafty,
yeah.
So
which it doesn't mean that
I
there's
still have so
necessarily
many
air
questions.
leaks.
That's what
Are
I'm
these
saying
blocks
here.
exposed on the inside?
I don't know.
Are they exposed on the outside? Like, where's he working from?
Yeah.
Let's say that they're
just
not
imagining-
exposed. Let's say he's got some paneling on the interior of the walls. Let's say that it's
Rip the paneling
an
out.
uninsulated block wall, essentially.
Yep.
So
I would do the
he
job.
just insulate it,
Take off the paneling.
or whatever interior wall covering he has.
Insulate up to that ceiling. Create
With-
a nice.
with what?
It probably it depends if you want to build how far you want to build into the house. I mean, if you're going minimal, you're going to use some rigid foam.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm assuming he's in an A-frame.
Yeah.
Typically not very big. Probably doesn't want to encroach too far.
Yeah.
Into the rooms. So probably going to use some foam against that. Bring it up. Put a bevel on it.
Or a miter.
Up at the ceiling. Leave yourself an 1/8 inch gap. Some spray foam around the edges. Canned spray foam.
And then put drywall over it.
Put whatever you want over it.
So why
Paneling.
from
Okay.
the inside instead of the outside?
I don't know if he can get at it at the outside. We don't know what's going on out there.
Well, we're assuming that he's going to have to take one side or the other off. So why are you choosing inside?
Outside, I'm assuming, is underneath a roof overhang and barely accessible.
Either
but maybe
way.
he wants to get down there and.
Either way,
Get
I think
under
the solution
there.
is either way. I think the solution is the same though.
Yeah.
Using rigid foam
Yeah, some
to
rigid
air
foam.
seal and insulate.
Yeah,
And it might help if those walls are currently hollow. Those block walls are currently hollow to
and he may be able to
pump some grout into those. You know, you can use a certain mix, like a high slump concrete mix, and fill them up.
Yeah, and if it is only a couple of feet, he may be able to go thicker and come into it may not make a difference in his floor plan to come in. If this only comes up 2 feet,
Yeah.
it may not make a difference to come in a little bit and have more insulation if that's important to him.
In that case, you could frame a stud wall in there and then fill it up with more spray foam and be done in one shot. And then you have studs you can hang your drywall on. That's a pretty common
Yeah,
thing to have done in a basement.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna look into this air tightness of block walls, though.
I got to roll, fellas.
All right then.
Tap it out.
That's going to wrap us up. Ryan's got to go. If you have questions or topics you need to have us talk about, send us an email at fhbpodcast@taunton.com. findhomebuilding.com/podcast, or you can find us all on social media and all the other places. So until next time, this is Justin for Rob and Brian and Jeff saying keep craft alive and happy building.